The day was like any other in the royal city of Eloria, a place known for its towering spires, bustling markets, and the quiet elegance of its people. The sun hung lazily in the sky, casting long shadows across the streets, while traders and travelers from all corners of the galaxy went about their business. Among the crowd, a young military officer named Rion strolled casually, a slight smirk playing on his lips as he overheard a conversation between two well-dressed citizens. "Did you hear the latest about the Queen?" one of them asked, his voice low as if speaking of something forbidden. Rion slowed his pace, his curiosity piqued. He knew the Queen well, or rather, he had seen her from a distance. The Queen of Eloria, Kalia, was a figure of great mystery and power, her presence almost otherworldly. Stories circulated constantly about her strength and beauty, about how she could defeat the mightiest warriors with a single strike, or lift objects that no one else could even budge. Some claimed she was more than human, an ancient being, perhaps, with abilities that defied logic. "Yes," the other replied. "They say she's stronger than most of our best soldiers. It's almost as if she doesn't need the guards that follow her everywhere. I heard she can crush a man's skull with her bare hands. Imagine the power in those arms." Rion chuckled quietly to himself. He had heard similar tales before, but this particular conversation caught his attention because of the way the man spoke. It was as though he was trying to convince himself rather than recounting a fact. "I've heard she can pick up a tank with ease," the first man continued, clearly enjoying the gossip. "Her physique is beyond anything I've ever seen. People say she's never looked the same twice in a month, growing taller, more defined, more perfect." Rion couldn't help but laugh under his breath. The Queen was known for her striking beauty, no doubt about that. But these rumors were getting out of hand. He had seen her on several occasions during state functions, always surrounded by her guards, her face a mask of grace and composure. No one had ever gotten close enough to truly understand her strength or her true appearance. The Queen was a figure of mystery, and like all mysteries, she was the subject of endless speculation. Rion, however, had no time for idle gossip. His duties as a military officer kept him busy, and the Queen's strange powers were of little concern to him, until now. As he walked toward the local tavern to meet a few comrades for a drink, he found himself still mulling over the conversation. Inside the tavern, the noise was lively, a mixture of clinking glasses, laughter, and murmured conversations. Rion made his way to a quiet corner where his friends had already gathered. He had served with them for several years, and they were familiar faces, all just as eager to unwind after a long day of drills and patrols. "Well, well," one of them, a tall man named Keon, said with a grin, "Look who finally decided to join us. I was starting to think you were avoiding us." Brian chuckled and took a seat, the weight of his uniform making the action feel heavier than it should. "I overheard some interesting gossip," he said, leaning forward slightly. "Did you guys hear the latest about the Queen?" Keon raised an eyebrow. "You mean about her superhuman abilities?" he asked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Rion nodded. "Exactly. I was just listening to some idiots talk about how she can apparently crush skulls with her bare hands and, get this, pick up tanks like they're nothing. It's starting to sound like they're talking about some kind of mythical beast, not the ruler of Eloria." The group laughed, but Rion could sense that, even among his closest friends, the rumors about the Queen held a certain weight. People didn't just talk about her for fun. They talked because they truly believed in the tales that surrounded her. And why not? Eloria's royal family had always been shrouded in mystery, and Queen Kalia, in particular, was said to possess a power that no one could truly comprehend. Keon leaned back in his chair, a smug look on his face. "Well, I wouldn't mind seeing that for myself." "Maybe we could get a glimpse of her next public appearance. I bet she's even more impressive up close." Rion shook his head. But a mischievous thought crossed his mind. What if we could get even closer than that? Keon's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" Well, Rian said with a grin, I was thinking of heading to the palace gates tomorrow morning. I've heard that the queen sometimes takes a walk around the gardens early in the day without her usual entourage. If we time it right, we might just get a good look at her. See for ourselves if all these rumors are true. Kian and the others exchanged glances, the challenge lighting a spark of excitement in their eyes. You're crazy, one of them said, but it was clear that the idea intrigued them. Come on, Ryan pressed. It'll be a laugh. We might even get to speak to her. Who knows? Maybe she'll give us a little private demonstration of her superhuman strength. The group agreed, the plan set in motion. It was absurd, of course, but that was part of the fun. They were soldiers, used to following orders. But for once, they would be the ones making the rules. The thought of getting closer to the queen, of seeing the woman who was the subject of so many rumors, excited them all. It was a harmless bit of fun, or so they thought. The next morning, Rian and his friends arrived at the palace gates just before dawn, hoping to catch a glimpse of the queen as she took her morning stroll. They waited in silence, the stillness of the morning heavy with anticipation. Rian's heart raced as he thought about what they might witness, what they might learn about the queen that had never been shared with the public. But as the first rays of sunlight began to touch the marble walls of the palace, something unexpected happened. A woman emerged from the shadows of the garden path, her long, dark hair flowing behind her like a veil. She wore a simple cloak, the hood pulled low over her face, and she walked with the grace of someone who had been trained in the ways of royalty. Her movements were fluid, almost ethereal, as if she were one with the very air around her. There was no entourage, no guards following her. She was alone. Ryan's breath caught in his throat as he realized the truth. This was no ordinary woman. This was the queen herself. The group froze, unsure of what to do. They had expected to catch a glimpse of her from a distance, but now, here she was, standing mere feet away from them, her presence undeniable. Rian's heart pounded in his chest as he tried to collect his thoughts. He had never been so close to her, and now it felt as if the rumors were beginning to come to life before his very eyes. The queen paused for a moment, sensing their presence. Slowly, she turned toward them, her piercing blue eyes locking onto Rian's. For a brief second, he felt as though the world had stopped, as if time itself had frozen. Her gaze was intense, but there was no malice in it, only curiosity. Rian opened his mouth, but no words came out. He was struck speechless, a rare occurrence for someone so accustomed to command. His friends, equally stunned, stood frozen in place. The queen tilted her head slightly, as if studying them. So, she said, her voice soft but strong. You find my physique amusing, do you?
Ryan blinked, his mind racing. He couldn't believe it.
He had just been talking about her the night before, making jokes about her strength and beauty, and now, here she was, standing before him, hearing it all.
Your Majesty, he stammered, quickly bowing his head.
I didn't mean to. We were just gossiping, the queen finished for him, her lips curling into a small, knowing smile. I've heard much worse, you know. It's quite common for people to talk about me behind my back. It seems you're no exception. Rian felt his face flush with embarrassment. He had never imagined this moment, had never expected to come face to face with the queen under such circumstances. His mind scrambled for an excuse, but there was nothing he could say that would make the situation better. She studied him for a moment longer, her eyes softening just slightly. I don't mind the gossip, you know, she said, her voice almost comforting. But I do wonder why you would feel the need to join in. Perhaps you think my strength and abilities are something to be mocked. Ryan swallowed hard, his heart racing. No, Your Majesty, he said quickly. I didn't mean to mock you. I was just... You were curious, she interjected, her tone calm. Curious about the truth of the rumors, about the power that I hold. It's understandable. But understand this. Not all of what you've heard is true. Some of it, yes, but not everything. Rian nodded, too stunned to speak. His friends remained silent as well, still unsure how to respond. They had thought they were engaging in harmless gossip, but they had no idea they would be caught in the act by the very woman they had been talking about. The Queen smiled, her expression shifting from stern to amused. If you want to know the truth, you'll have to come closer than this. Come with me, and I'll show you what rumors are worth spreading, and what ones are better left alone. Rian's heart skipped a beat. Was she inviting them to follow her? To see the Queen's true strength for themselves? He glanced at his friends, who were equally speechless. They had never imagined such an encounter, much less an invitation to see the Queen in her element. But what would they do now? Rian stood there, frozen in place, his mind reeling from the shock of the Queen's presence. His friends were equally stunned, standing as if the very air around them had thickened, making it harder to breathe. The woman they had been gossiping about just moments ago was standing before them, her blue eyes piercing through their hesitation like a beam of light. Her voice was calm but carried the weight of authority, and Rian could feel his legs trembling slightly under the pressure. "Are you coming?" she asked, her voice soft, but it had an undeniable command to it. Her gaze didn't leave Rian, and in that moment, he realized she wasn't merely asking. They were expected to follow. Rian exchanged looks with his friends. Kian, the boldest of the group, seemed to snap out of his stupor first. He gave a nervous chuckle, rubbing the back of his neck as if trying to laugh away the tension. We weren't really. Kian started, but the Queen cut him off with a simple gesture.
"I'm not here to chastise you," she said. Her lips curled into a faint smile, but it wasn't one that made Rian feel better.
Instead, it had an edge to it, like she was toying with them. "I'm here to offer you something you didn't expect." She turned, and with a fluid motion, she began walking away from the gates, her cloak swirling around her in the cool morning breeze. Without thinking, Rian followed, his feet carrying him forward despite the whirlwind of thoughts spinning in his head. Kian and the others hesitated for a moment before following suit. None of them could explain why, but curiosity was stronger than fear. They walked in silence, the sound of their footsteps soft on the cobblestone path. The Queen led them deeper into the royal gardens, away from the palace walls and into a secluded area that Rian had never seen before. The air here felt different, heavier, almost charged with some unseen energy. It was as if they had crossed some invisible boundary and entered a space where the rules of the ordinary world didn't apply. The trees in this part of the garden were taller, their leaves glistening with dew, and the flowers that lined the path were of colors Rian had never encountered. The light seemed to bend around them, casting everything in a soft golden glow. It was beautiful, almost surreal. Rian found himself captivated by the surroundings, but his attention kept drifting back to the Queen. She walked with the grace of a dancer, her movements fluid and effortless. There was no hesitation in her step, no sign of weakness. She was the embodiment of control, of power held in reserve, and Rian couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. They reached a clearing in the garden, where a large stone circle stood in the center. The Queen turned to face them, her eyes no longer playful, but intense. "You wanted to know the truth about me?" she said, her voice low and steady. "Now, you'll see it for yourselves." Rian swallowed, trying to steady his nerves. His friends were all looking at the Queen, some with uncertainty, others with a mixture of excitement and fear. It was clear that none of them knew what to expect, but they had all been drawn into this moment, whether they liked it or not. The Queen raised her hand, and without a word the ground beneath them seemed to vibrate. At first it was subtle, a faint tremor in the earth, barely noticeable, but then it intensified, and Rian felt the ground shift beneath his feet. He stumbled slightly, but he quickly regained his balance, his eyes wide with disbelief. What is this?" Keon muttered, his voice tinged with both awe and fear. The queen's smile was small but genuine, a knowing smile, as if she had expected this reaction. She stepped forward, her boots barely making a sound on the ground, and placed her hand gently on a large stone that lay in the center of the circle. Without any visible effort, she lifted the stone from the ground as though it weighed no more than a feather. The stone was massive, easily the size of a small building, and yet she held it with one hand, effortlessly. Rian felt his mouth go dry. He had seen feats of strength in the military before, but this was something else. The queen held the stone aloft for a few moments, then gently set it back down, her movements as graceful as they had been before. "Is that real enough for you?" she asked, her voice carrying a hint of amusement. Ryan couldn't find the words. He had been talking about her strength not an hour ago, joking with his friends about the rumors, but now, seeing it for himself, he was overwhelmed. He looked at his comrades, and their faces mirrored his disbelief. Keon, who had been so quick to make jokes before, was now silent, his mouth hanging open. "Your Majesty," Rian finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. How do you do that?" The queen's expression softened, though there was a certain sadness in her eyes. "It's not something I like to show," she admitted, "but there are times when people need to understand the truth. They need to see what I'm capable of, not just hear the rumors." Rian nodded, still in shock. "But you're not like other rulers. I thought it was all just stories." "Stories are often based on truth," she replied, "but people twist him to suit their own needs." "But the Baron, damn, it's easier to believe in a fairy tale than to face reality. I could crush anyone who threatened my people if I wanted, but that's not the way I lead." Her words were heavy with meaning, and Rian could feel the weight of them settling in his chest. He had thought of the queen as a distant, untouchable figure, someone who could never be understood. But now, standing here with her, he realized that she was more than just a ruler. She was a person burdened by power, a person who carried the weight of her people's expectations and fears. "I never meant to offend you," Ryan said, his voice sincere. "We were just joking. We didn't know." "I know," the queen interrupted gently. "It's not the gossip that bothers me, Ryan. It's the fact that people think they can know me without ever truly seeing me, without ever understanding what it means to carry this responsibility. You've seen a glimpse of it now, but there's much more to me than this strength you've heard so much about." Rian felt a knot form in his stomach. He had never thought about the queen in such a way. She wasn't just a symbol of power. She was a woman who had to live with the consequences of that power every day. The thought was sobering. "Why show us this?" Keon asked, his voice hesitant. "Why let us see what you can do?" The queen turned to him, her gaze sharp. "Because you will remember it," she said. "And because you will understand the burden I carry. It's not enough to be strong, to have power. People need to see it, to know that you're capable of protecting them. But even then, they will still judge you." Rian could feel the weight of her words. The queen was right. She had just shown them a part of herself that no one else had ever seen. And yet it felt like it wasn't enough. The rumors would continue, the whispers would never stop, and she would always be the subject of stories, some true, most false. I didn't understand before," Rian said quietly. "But now I do." The queen nodded, her expression softening. "Good! Now you can see what it means to be more than just a ruler." "It means carrying the weight of expectations, of fears, of hopes. And it means never being able to show weakness." The air around them felt heavier now, filled with the unspoken understanding that had passed between them. Rian, Keon, and the others stood in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The queen had opened a door they had never expected to walk through, and now they saw her in a new light.
"Come," the queen said.
breaking the silence.
Let's walk. There's much more I can show you. Without waiting for a response, she turned and walked deeper into the garden. Rian hesitated for only a moment before following her, his thoughts racing. He had come here expecting nothing more than a few moments of amusement, a chance to see the Queen in person. But what he had learned today was something far more profound. And for the first time, he felt like he truly understood the woman who sat on the throne of Eloria. As they continued walking through the royal gardens, Rian felt a growing sense of awe mixed with confusion. The Queen, Kalia, had shown them something that none of them had ever expected. A glimpse into the strength she possessed, the power she could wield if she chose to. But it wasn't just her strength that had left an impression on Ryan. It was the understanding she had of her role, the burden of being a ruler in a world that constantly judged her, that had made him reconsider everything he had ever thought about her. The garden around them seemed to mirror the Queen's presence. Majestic, but controlled, like an artist who could shape nature with a single thought. The paths twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the heart of the garden, where only the faintest rays of sunlight touched the ground. The air smelled of fresh flowers, but there was a subtle tension in the atmosphere, as if every tree, every stone, was watching them. Rian stole a glance at Kian, who walked beside him, his usual bold demeanor replaced with a quiet curiosity. The others were similarly silent, clearly still processing the events that had just unfolded. None of them had spoken much since the Queen had shown them her strength. They were all too caught up in the weight of the moment. "So," Kian said finally, breaking the silence, "what now?" Rian glanced at the Queen, who continued walking ahead, her posture as regal as ever. "We follow her," Ryan replied quietly, his voice still filled with awe. "We've been given a chance to see something no one else has." "Let's see where it leads." Kian nodded, though his face remained unsure. Right. But I didn't expect things to go like this. I thought we were just going to get a glimpse of her, maybe hear some rumors, but not this. I mean, she's not like any ruler I've ever seen. Rian thought about that for a moment. He had always seen the Queen as a distant figure, someone who was untouchable and almost mythical in her power. But now, after what he had witnessed, he realized how wrong he had been. She wasn't just a symbol of power, she was its embodiment, a living, breathing force that carried the weight of an entire civilization on her shoulders. The more he thought about it, the more he began to question everything he had been told. They walked for what felt like hours, though it was likely only a few minutes. The path wound through a series of quiet groves, each one more secluded than the last. At times, Ryan thought he could hear faint whispers in the wind, but he couldn't tell if they were real or just his mind playing tricks on him. Eventually, the Queen stopped in front of a large, ancient stone building, its walls covered in creeping ivy. The structure appeared to be centuries old, though it was well maintained, a symbol of the strength and endurance of the royal family. The building was far from the grand palace, a quiet, hidden retreat that only a select few knew about. "This is where I come to think," the Queen said, her voice calm but carrying the weight of something unspoken. "It's where I go when the world becomes too much, when the expectations of being queen feel too heavy. I come here to remember who I am." Rian looked at the building, then back at her. He had never imagined the Queen would have such a place, somewhere to be alone, to reflect. He had always assumed that power meant isolation, that those who wielded it never got to show any sign of weakness. But here, in front of him, was a woman who was not only powerful, but human, too. She turned toward them, her eyes scanning the group. "You will understand more once you've seen inside." Without another word, she led them inside the stone building. The interior was surprisingly simple. There were no grand decorations or extravagant furnishings. Instead, the walls were adorned with old tapestries and paintings depicting moments in Ioloria's history. Battles fought, victories won. and the royal family standing proudly. Through the ages, the air inside felt cool, yet somehow comforting, and Ryan couldn't help but feel a sense of reverence as he followed the queen through the dimly lit corridors. They came to a large room at the back of the building. The walls were lined with bookshelves, filled with scrolls and ancient texts. A small fire crackled in a hearth in the center of the room, casting flickering shadows on the stone walls. In the far corner there was a large wooden desk, piled high with papers and maps, and beside it a chair that looked as though it had been worn from years of use. The queen walked over to the desk and sat down, gesturing for them to take a seat in front of her. "This," she said, her voice softer now, "is where the real work happens. This is where I make the decisions that affect the lives of everyone in this kingdom. It's not just about ruling. It's about knowing the weight of every choice I make." Then Rian and the others sat down, their eyes fixed on the queen. For the first time, they saw her not as a distant ruler, but as a person. Someone who was not only powerful, but deeply aware of the consequences of that power. "You must understand," the queen continued, "I do not rule by strength alone. The physical power you've seen is only a part of who I am. But the true burden lies in the decisions I make every day. The lives of millions depend on me, and every choice carries a cost." Rian nodded, his thoughts racing. He had never considered that the queen's power came with such a burden. To be a ruler, to have the ability to change the course of history with a single decision. How could anyone bear such a weight without it breaking them? "But you make it look so easy," Keon said quietly. "You carry yourself like you've never been burdened. How do you do it?" The queen's eyes softened slightly, though there was still an air of strength about her. "I have learned to hide it," she said simply. "No one can afford to see weakness in a leader, not when the stakes are this high. If I showed fear or uncertainty, it would weaken the people's faith in me. And without that faith, the kingdom would crumble." Rion felt a pang of guilt. He had never truly understood what it meant to lead, to carry the hopes and dreams of an entire nation on your shoulders. But now, as he listened to the queen speak, he began to understand. It wasn't just about strength. It was about the constant pressure, the never-ending responsibility that came with the title of monarch. "Is that why you hide away sometimes?" Rion asked, his voice tentative. "Because of the pressure?" The queen nodded, her expression turning distant for a moment. "Yes. Sometimes the weight of it all is too much. And when that happens, I retreat here, to think, to reflect, to remind myself of why I do this. It's not always easy to be strong, to always have the answers." Rion sat back, absorbing her words. He had spent so long thinking about the queen in terms of her power, her strength, her beauty. But now he saw her in a different light. She wasn't just a ruler. She was a person who had to make impossible choices every day, choices that no one else could truly understand. And that made her strength even more impressive. "We don't see it," Keon said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We don't see the burden you carry. All we see is the queen, the perfect, untouchable figure. We never think about what it costs you to be that person." The queen looked at them, her gaze filled with understanding.
"No one ever does. And that's the way it has to be."
"If I let the weight show, if I let the cracks show, everything falls apart. So, I keep it hidden. But you, now, you understand." Rian nodded slowly. He had come here expecting to learn about the queen's strength, about the rumors and stories he had heard. But what he had learned was something far deeper. The queen's power wasn't just physical. It was emotional, mental, and spiritual. It was the strength to carry the burden of leadership, to bear the weight of an entire kingdom without faltering. "We're sorry," Rian said, his voice sincere. "We didn't understand. But now we do." The queen smiled faintly. "I know you didn't. Most people don't. But now you've seen a glimpse of the truth. And that's all I can ask for. Understanding. It's the hardest thing to achieve, but it's the most valuable. There was a long silence as Rayon and his friends sat, contemplating what they had just heard. The Queen's words hung in the air, heavy with meaning, and Rayon could feel the shift inside himself. He had come here as a skeptic, as someone who saw the Queen as a figure to be admired from afar. But now he saw her as a person with the same struggles, the same burdens, and the same fears as anyone else. And for the first time, he felt truly humbled. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, filling the room with warmth. Rayon sat on the edge of a stone bench, his thoughts still swirling from everything he had learned over the past few hours. His friends sat around him, each of them equally lost in their own reflections. The Queen, Kalia, had opened their eyes to a side of leadership that none of them had ever considered. They had come here expecting a glimpse of a powerful ruler, but instead, they had witnessed the burden that came with such power. The weight of it hung in the air, like an invisible force that they all could feel, but none of them could fully comprehend. The Queen's vulnerability, though hidden behind her regal exterior, was something they hadn't expected. She was more than just a figurehead. She was a woman who carried the fate of an entire kingdom on her shoulders, and the cost of that responsibility was far higher than any of them had ever imagined. Rayon glanced up at the Queen, who was sitting across from them, her hands folded in her lap. Her expression was calm, but there was a flicker of something deeper in her eyes, a quiet strength yet tinged with weariness. She had been quiet since they entered the building, as if giving them the space to process everything she had revealed to them. Finally, it was Kian who spoke first, breaking the heavy silence. I don't know about you guys, but I'm feeling different. I mean, I've always heard the stories about her, about how powerful and untouchable she is, but this is something else entirely. Rayon nodded, still trying to wrap his mind around everything. Yeah, I don't think any of us really understood what it meant to be in her shoes. She's not just a ruler, she's a symbol, a living embodiment of everything this kingdom is built on. Kian shook his head. I don't think it's just that. It's the way she holds herself, the way she keeps it all together. I don't think anyone could bear the weight of that responsibility without breaking down. But she doesn't. She carries it with grace. And it's humbling. Rayon glanced back at the Queen. She had her eyes closed now, her posture still regal, but there was something almost fragile about her. Something that made Rayon realize just how much strength it took to remain composed under such pressure. She hides it so well, he said softly. But that doesn't mean it isn't there. She's stronger than anyone I've ever met. Kian let out a deep breath. Stronger than anyone? Yeah. But in a way, I think she's stronger because she doesn't show it all the time. It's like she has to be perfect. She has to be flawless, because that's the only way people will believe in her. Rayon looked at Kian thoughtfully. You're right. I think that's what we've all missed. We've always seen her as this figurehead, someone who has all the answers, all the strength. But the truth is, she's human too. She has her doubts, her fears, her weaknesses. Kian finished for him, his voice barely a whisper. There was another long silence, but this time it felt different. It wasn't heavy with the weight of their earlier revelations. It was reflective, almost peaceful. The room was filled with the crackling of the fire and the soft sounds of their breathing. Rayon felt a sense of respect building within him, not just for the Queen, but for the responsibility that came with being a leader, a figurehead, a protector. The Queen opened her eyes slowly, as if sensing their quiet conversation. What are you all thinking? She asked, her voice gentle but strong, like a calm breeze cutting through a storm. Kian hesitated, then spoke. I'm just thinking that we've been so wrong about you. We thought we understood what it meant to be a ruler, to have power, but we had no idea what it really takes to carry that weight. The Queen's expression softened, but her gaze remained sharp. That's because no one can truly understand, unless they've been in my position. Power is a strange thing. It can elevate you, make you seem untouchable, but it also isolates you. When you're at the top, there's no one left to turn to. You carry everything on your shoulders, and if you falter, it all comes crashing down. Rian nodded slowly. I've seen power before, on the battlefield, in the military. But what you have, it's different. It's not just about strength. It's about control. And control isn't just physical. It's mental. It's emotional. The queen met his gaze, and for a moment there was a flicker of something in her eyes. A sadness, perhaps, or maybe just exhaustion. It's the hardest part, she admitted, to keep control, to stay composed, and to never let the cracks show. Because if I do, the people I protect, they'll lose faith in me. And once that happens, everything falls apart. Kaon shifted uncomfortably in his seat. But how do you do it? How do you keep everything inside when it seems like it's all too much? The queen exhaled softly, her eyes distant. I don't know. I've learned to compartmentalize it. To separate my personal feelings from my duties. It's not easy, but it's the only way I can function. I focus on the kingdom, on the people, and I remind myself why I do it. I remind myself of the lives that depend on my decisions. Rian could see the weight in her eyes now. The weight of all those lives, all those choices. He had seen leaders break under less pressure, under far smaller burdens. But the queen, she had carried this weight for years, and she still stood tall. That was the strength that few could understand. What about when you need a break? Rian asked softly. What do you do when you're not being the queen? When you're just yourself? The queen's gaze softened for a moment, and she let out a small laugh, though it was laced with a hint of sadness. I don't know if I've ever been just myself. The queen and I are intertwined. It's hard to separate the two. But when I need time for myself, I come here. I retreat to places like this, where I can think, where I can remember who I was before all of this started. Rian felt a pang of sympathy. It wasn't just the physical demands of ruling that had made the queen who she was. It was the emotional and mental toll that had shaped her. She had to be someone she wasn't, someone the people could look up to. And she had to hide everything else. There was another long pause as the queen glanced at each of them, her gaze sharp but softer now. I've given you more than I've ever given anyone. I've shown you what it's really like to be me, and I'm trusting you to understand. Keon was the first to speak, his voice more measured now, as though he had come to terms with what he had learned. We understand, he said. I think we do, at least. And I think we can respect it. Rian nodded, his heart filled with newfound respect, not just for the queen, but for everything she had shared with them. They had come here expecting to see the queen's strength, her power, and they had seen that. But what they hadn't expected was to witness her vulnerability, her humanity. They had thought she was untouchable, but they now knew that even the strongest person had their limits. The queen looked at them for a long moment, then stood up, her posture still regal, still commanding. But there was something different in the way she carried herself now, something that spoke of quiet strength, of understanding, of a person who had come to terms with her own power and the responsibility that came with it. You will leave here today with a new perspective, she said, and you will carry that perspective with you, no matter where you go. Remember this. Power is not just about strength. It's about responsibility. It's about sacrifice. And it's about understanding what you carry with you. Rian and his friends stood up as well, their minds swirling with the gravity of her words. They had learned something today, not just about the queen, but about leadership, about power, and about the hidden burdens that everyone carried with them. As they made their way back through the garden and toward the palace gates, Rian felt a deep sense of gratitude. They had been given a glimpse into something rare, something powerful. And as they left the queen's private retreat, they knew that they would never see her, or anyone in power, the same way again.